My mother, Carol, was always a project. A sweet, well-meaning project that required constant guidance and a firm hand. People saw her as this fragile, kind-hearted old woman, but I knew the truth. She was a walking liability. A bottomless pit of naive decisions and misplaced generosity. It was an exhausting cycle of me trying to save her from herself and her acting like I was the villain. I remember the day it all began, though I suppose it had been building for years. She had just finished knitting a sweater for my son, Liam. It was a monstrosity of mismatched yarns, lumpy stitches, and a neckline that was far too tight. Her face was alight with pride as she held it up. "Look, Jessica. I worked on it for months. Isn't it just beautiful?" I felt a familiar, tight knot in my stomach. The effort was there, I had to give her that, but the result was so pathetic. A tangible representation of her inability to function in the real world. I looked at the lumpy, hand-me-down sweater, then at my sleek, stylish son. "It is cute, Mom," I said, forcing a smile that did not reach my eyes. But kids these days just do not wear things like this. It is so old-fashioned. Her face fell, and her hands, clutching the ugly sweater, began to tremble. I felt a fleeting pang of guilt, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "I am just being honest, Mom. Someone has to be. I am trying to save you from getting your feelings hurt by someone else." That was the thing with Mom. She was always trying to be the hero, to be the loving, giving mother, but she never seemed to understand that her brand of help was more of a hindrance. She had paid for my college, my first car, and even the down payment on my house. But every single time, she would insist on a small, insignificant detail that would eventually become a major issue. She would pay for a car, but then she would insist that I drive her around. She would give me money, but then she would constantly remind me of her sacrifices. I was grateful, of course, but it was suffocating. I felt like I was constantly indebted to her, constantly living in her shadow. It was time for that to change. That night, she sat in the living room, surrounded by her old photos, her memories, her life. I watched her, and I felt a sudden, powerful sense of resentment. She had always made my life about her. Her sacrifices, her needs, her feelings. It was time for my life to be about me. I made my decision. I would take control. I would protect her from her own bad decisions. And I would finally, for once, be the one in charge. After that night, the plan began. It was not a sudden, dramatic change, but a slow, calculated erosion of her life. My goal was simple, to make her understand that she could not function without me. I would prove to her, and to everyone else, that I was the only one who truly had her best interests at heart. I started with the small things. I told my friends and neighbors that she was showing early signs of dementia. "She is so forgetful," I would say. "I am so worried about her." I would sigh dramatically, as if the burden was too heavy to bear. People would nod in sympathy, their eyes filled with pity for me, not her. It was so easy. Next, I began to isolate her. I accidentally disconnected her landline phone and told her that it was a technical issue. When her friends called, they would get a busy signal, and I would tell them that she was too tired to talk. I would lie and tell her that her friends were too busy to visit. "You know how it is, Mom," I would say. "Everyone has their own lives. We have to be realistic." The most difficult part was convincing my children. They loved their grandmother. They saw her as this magical, benevolent figure, a source of endless cookies and unconditional affection. It was a hard sell, but I was determined. I told them that she was not herself anymore, that she was confused, and that her old-fashioned ways were not healthy for them. I would make up stories about how she would say strange things or forget where she was. "She just does not know what is best for you anymore," I would say, and they would look at me with wide, concerned eyes. The gaslighting was the most effective part of my campaign. When she would misplace her keys or her glasses, I would pretend to look for them, only to find them in an absurd place and accuse her of being forgetful. "See, Mom," I would say, with a tone of mock pity, "I told you that you are not as sharp as you used to be." She would look at me, her eyes filled with confusion and a hint of fear, and I would know that I was winning. I had successfully made her doubt her own mind. I was not doing this out of malice. I was doing this out of love. I was preparing her for a future where she would be completely dependent on me. It was a kindness, in a way. I was saving her from herself, and I was making sure that she would be safe and secure. It was for her own good. But for my plan to truly succeed, I needed to gain control of her finances. Without money, she was truly helpless. And that was my ultimate goal. The psychological game was going well, but it was just the beginning. The real power, the ultimate control, lay in her finances. Her pension, her savings, the deed to her house, all of it was a potential liability. It was a ticking time bomb. So, I decided to defuse it. I started with a simple, seemingly innocent request. "Mom," I said one day, "let me help you with your papers. The bank statements are so confusing, and I am worried that you are being taken advantage of." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of suspicion and trust. "I am fine, Jessica," she said. But I knew better. I persisted, patiently and persuasively, until she finally gave in. "Okay, fine," she said, but only for a little while. Once I had access to her accounts, I was stunned. She had more money than I had ever imagined. It was not a fortune, but it was enough to make a difference. Enough to pay off my car loan, enough to make a down payment on a new car for Michael, enough to finally book that trip to Italy that I had always dreamed of. It was my money, really. I was her only child, her sole heir. It was only a matter of time before it was all mine. But I could not just take it. That would be illegal, and I was not a criminal. I was a dutiful daughter. So, I started to take small amounts, slowly, methodically, so that she would not notice. I would transfer small sums into my account, telling her that it was for paying bills or for taking care of her needs. I would sell her old and used jewelry and furniture online, telling her that I was getting rid of clutter and that the money was going towards her care. She did not seem to notice, but one day, she did something that completely threw me off guard. She came to me and asked for a small amount of money. "I need to buy a gift for my friend, Martha," she said. "But I cannot seem to find my wallet." I looked at her, my heart pounding in my chest. Was she testing me? Did she know? "You are so forgetful, Mom," I said, forcing a smile. I gave her the money, a small, insignificant amount that I knew she would not remember. The fear in my heart was quickly replaced with a sense of triumph. She was so helpless, so dependent on me, that she did not even have control over her own money. The game was mine. But I knew that this was not enough. I needed more. I needed to gain full control of her assets, her house, her life. I needed a legal document, a final, unassailable piece of paper that would give me all the power. I had to convince her to sign a gift deed, a legal document that would transfer all her assets to me. I had to make her believe that it was for her own good, that it was the only way to protect her from herself. And I knew exactly how to do it. I would use the one thing that she had always valued the most, my love. I knew that a direct approach would not work. She was too suspicious, too aware of my motivations. So, I decided to change tactics. I would feign remorse, act like the loving daughter she had always wanted me to be. I would lure her into a false sense of security, and then I would strike. I started with a simple gesture. I called her and said, "Mom, I am so sorry. I have been so distant lately. I have been so stressed with work and the kids. I miss you. Let's go on a trip, just the two of us." Her voice, filled with a mixture of surprise and joy, broke my heart. "Oh, Jessica," she said, "I would love that." I could hear the hope in her voice. The hope that I was finally changing, that I was finally becoming the daughter she had always dreamed of. We went to a beautiful resort in the mountains. We went for long walks, we went to the spa, we talked for hours. I told her how much I loved her, how much I needed her. I told her that I was so grateful for everything she had done for me. She was so happy. I had never seen her so happy. On the last day of our trip, I told her that I had a surprise for her. "I have found the most beautiful place for you," I said. "It is a retirement community, but it is not a normal one. It is a beautiful, serene place with a beautiful garden, a library, and a pool. It is a place where you can finally relax and be taken care of." Her face, which had been so full of joy, suddenly went blank. "Jessica," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of disappointment and sadness. "I do not want to move. I want to stay in my house." "But Mom," I said, "it is for your own good. You are not safe there anymore. You are not safe alone." I took her hand in mine, and I looked her in the eyes. "Please," I said, "do this for me. I love you so much. I just want you to be happy and safe." She looked at me for a long, quiet moment, and then she said, "I hope that you are ready for this." Her words were not a threat. They were a statement of fact. A calm, prophetic statement. I did not understand what she meant, but I did not care. I had one. We went back to her house, and I had a lawyer waiting. I had him draw up the papers, and I had her sign them. The gift deed. The final document that would give me full control of her house. She signed it without a word, her hands steady, her eyes vacant. I felt a rush of pure triumph. It was done. I was free. I was in control. I had won. I left her in the house alone and defeated. I had no idea that I had not won. I had only set the stage for the final act. For weeks after that, I watched her. I would visit her occasionally, but only to make sure that she was still there, still broken, still defeated. She was a ghost in her own house. She would sit in her living room, staring out the window, her hands clasped in her lap. She would not speak. She would not eat. She was a hollow shell of the woman she used to be. I felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. It was a job well done. I had finally won. But then, one day, something changed. I went to her house, and I found her sitting at her desk, her hands resting on a large, leather-bound book. She was not staring out the window. She was not a ghost. She was a woman with a purpose. "Mom," I said, "what are you doing?" She did not answer. She just looked at me, her eyes filled with a new, unfamiliar light. It was a cold, steely look. A look of resolve. "Mom," I said, "what is going on?" She did not answer. She simply closed the book and put it away. It was the first time in weeks that I had seen her do something that was not directed by me. I did not know what to make of it. I dismissed it as another one of her episodes. "She is just getting a new wave of her depression," I said to Michael. But I was wrong. It was not a wave of depression. It was a wave of something else. Something much more powerful. Over the next few days, I began to see more changes. She started eating again. She started doing her own laundry. She even started to go for walks in the park. It was a slow, methodical return to life. And with every step, I felt a familiar pang of resentment. She was not supposed to be getting better. She was supposed to be in a state of quiet despair. She was supposed to be defeated. One day, I was at her house, helping her clean. I went into her room, and I saw a new, brightly colored phone on her nightstand. "Mom," I said, "what is this?" She did not answer. She simply looked at me, a tiny, almost imperceptible smirk on her lips. She had done something without my permission, without my knowledge. My heart pounded in my chest. What was she doing? What was she planning? I had no idea, but I knew that I had to find out. I had to regain control. I had to show her that she was still a prisoner and that I was still the one in charge. I was convinced that she was merely attempting to get my attention. Her errands, her meetings with old friends, which I dismissed as sessions of pitiful complaints, all seemed to me to be nothing more than desperate attempts to regain my control. "She thinks that this will make me nervous," I would say to Michael, rolling my eyes. In reality, I was not nervous. I was amused. I laughed at her pathetic attempts, at her naivety. I was so secure in my victory that even her strange, disjointed words seemed to me to be nothing more than another symptom of her aging mind. I noticed that she spent a lot of time on the internet. Watching her shows, I thought, at least it keeps her occupied. In truth, she was studying legal forums, reading articles about property rights and how to annul a gift deed. I saw her flipping through old photo albums, and I thought it was nostalgia. In fact, she was searching for a picture of my father and me with her old friend, an influential notary. The photo was needed so that he would remember her when she came to see him. I even caught her once, about to leave the house, and asked where she was going. "To my appointments," she replied. I thought she was a hypochondriac, but she was actually going to meetings with an attorney who was helping her gather evidence against me and Michael. She asked me to help her digitize old tapes so that the grandchildren could see our past. I agreed, thinking it was a pointless waste of time. I did not know that these tapes contained recordings of conversations where I detailed to my friend how I planned to trick my mother and take possession of her house. She had always known I could be unpredictable, and she had a plan in case I ever decided to do something like this. I felt that something had changed. Her eyes. They no longer held fear. They held a cold, steely resolve. She became calmer, more agreeable. She started to agree with everything. I mistakenly took this as a sign of my victory, thinking that I had completely broken her spirit. But in reality, she was merely lulling me into a false sense of security. She began to gather her old friends, hire the best lawyers, and collect all the documents that I had so carefully lost. She even started taking English lessons. "Why do you need that, Mother?" I asked. "I have always wanted to travel," she replied. I thought she was just dreaming. I did not know that she was already planning to move abroad. And then, a day came when I began to realize that this was not just a game of the mind. I received a call from my bank. "Your account has been frozen," the voice on the other end said. I did not believe it. I was sure it was a mistake. But when I went to the bank, they told me that my account had been frozen by a court order. They would not tell me why. I was terrified. My heart was pounding in my chest. Something was wrong. My mother was too calm. And I was too scared. The call was not from a lawyer. It was from my husband, Michael. His voice was a cold, unfamiliar rasp on the phone. "Jessica," he said, "I have been served with a lawsuit. It is from your mother." "What have you done?" My mind went blank. The bank account, the strange looks, her secretive trips, it all came crashing down on me. I tried to tell him that she was crazy, that she had nothing, but he was not listening. "The lawsuit is for fraud. It is for the deed to the house. It is for everything." I could feel the ground giving way beneath my feet. The following days were a blur of lawyers, court papers, and endless arguments. My mother's lawyer was a shark. He had every document, every email, every detail. He had the original deed, a testament to her ownership, and the recorded conversations where I confessed to my lies and manipulations. I could not believe it. How had she done it? How had a frail old woman outsmarted me? I watched as my life crumbled before my eyes. My career was in ruins. My reputation was destroyed. My friends, who had always believed in me, now looked at me with disgust and pity. Even Michael, my rock, my partner in crime, turned his back on me. He blamed me for everything, for the lies, the deceit, the loss of his reputation. He left me. He took the kids. And he was gone. The final meeting was in the lawyer's office. She was there, sitting across the table from me, her back straight, her head held high. She looked at me, a silent, all-knowing smirk on her lips. She had won. "Why, Mother?" I whispered. "Why did you do this?" She took a deep breath, and for the first time in months, she spoke. Her voice was strong, clear, and steady. "I had to protect myself, Jessica," she said, "and I had to protect my legacy. You see, when your father left me, I had nothing. I had to start from scratch. So I sold our old house and I invested the money. I bought the house on the street you always wanted to live on, the one you always told me you deserved. But I did not buy it for myself. I bought it for my grandchildren. It was my secret weapon. My blood ran cold. The house, the one I had coveted for so long, the one she had purchased with my father's money, was hers. She had been the one to hide her assets, not me. She looked at me, a final, victorious glint in her eyes. "You taught me a very important lesson, Jessica. You taught me to never underestimate my own strength. You taught me that sometimes, to find your true power, you have to let go of everything you think you own." With that, she stood up, a peaceful smile on her face, and walked out the door. I was left alone in the cold, empty room. The silence was deafening. My world was in ruins. I had nothing. My mother had taken everything from me. But even in my defeat, I did not feel remorse. I did not feel guilt. I felt a burning hatred, a pure, unadulterated rage. I hated her. I hated her for her victory, for her strength, for her secret weapon. I hated her for showing me what a fool I had been. She may have won the battle, but the war was far from over. I would not rest until she was nothing. Until I was everything.